I started my lathe journey teaching myself and watching videos from YouTube. The first lathe I had was a small little itty bitty micro lathe, and I could do like ferro rod handles on it. Things that were very small. I think it was no more than 2 inches in diameter. Tiny little thing that I was given when I bought a big lathe that I never used. It still sits in the garage. It was a big Harbor Freight one. It's actually missing some things. But the thing about when I bought that was the woman who sold it to me gave me so much wood, which I still have today. It was maple and cherry and mahogany, and it was a great deal, even if I didn't use the lathe, because I felt that it was too big. I didn't want to spend the money to buy the parts that were missing. And plus you have to like bolt it down to a table because it's like 40 something inches long, 48, I'm not sure. Anyway, the next lathe I got, a friend of mine had gotten at an auction, and in exchange for storing all this stuff that came with it, he said I could use it. And that was the Micro Mark or something it was called, and I think I could turn nothing bigger than 4 inches on it. And it was 4 by I don't know. I never used it for anything with length because I made cups and bowls with it. But I used those first two lathes, the little ones, to learn what it felt like to turn wood. What it was like with the wood spinning and putting a tool on it, and the amount of force you needed to hold on to the tool, what each tool felt like when it was touching the wood. A lot of things that it's hard to put into words. You just have to do it and experience it for yourself to understand, you know, the techniques. And so for about 2 years I worked on that micro mark, and I made a bunch of bowls and a bunch of cups, and they came out really nice. Now, a doctor I had worked with had given me some blanks that were spalted maple. He gave me some black maple ones too, beautiful, but the spalted maple ones were bigger, and I had no knowledge of turning spalted maple or turning something that was bigger than what I had been using. I learned how to shape wood. I learned how to remove wood from a piece of an article that was going to be a cup, to hollow out the inside. And same thing with bowls. So I thought that that would transfer over to a bigger lathe, which is what I decided I needed, because I could only do up to 4 inches in diameter on the little Micromark lathe. So I wanted to be able to do something bigger. So I ended up going to Harbor Freight, and I bought a 10 by 18 lathe, wood lathe from Harbor Freight, and brought it home. And I really didn't use it very much. And then recently I was inspired by Linda Campbell, who's an amazing wood turner and artist, to try to work on the lathe again, because I've been so busy doing all these other projects, crocheting blankets for everybody, making wooden chests for everybody, making these mobiles from the resin epoxy. So I thought, the lathe has been calling to me. I want to go back out there and see what I can do with the lathe. I didn't give a lot of thought to the fact that the piece of spalted maple was A, entirely out of round, B, very heavy, and I just thought I'd put a faceplate on it and try to get it as close to centered as I could. And thus began a journey that took me days and hours of watching videos and trying to find out what I was doing wrong, trying to turn that big piece of spalt. When I thought I had the spalted maple, it was 7 inches in diameter and almost 4 inches wide. I had it on a mounting plate. I put it on the lathe, and it was wobbly, but I'd seen wobbly wood before. My thought process was off, though, because the pieces that were wobbly before were much smaller. So I kind of thought that I would be able to just go ahead and turn it and get the wobblies out of it, and knock off all the non-round edges. That did not work out that way. When I'm focusing on something and really trying to concentrate, I don't record it because I'm too concerned about the camera and not paying attention to what I'm doing. So when I put that big piece of spalted maple on the lathe and turned it for the first time, I got a bowl gouge out and went to try to turn the bowl gouge on that piece of wood, and almost immediately it like grabbed at the bowl gouge, and I heard crack, and something hit me in the chest, and I was like in shock. I think I quick switched off the lathe, and I sat down and took a minute to get kind of compose myself because it scared the crap out of me. And when I looked at the piece of wood, I saw a crack going right straight through it. And then there was like slivers of it missing. So I figure what hit me in the chest was the explosion, outward explosion of from that crack. It shot out some pieces of splinters at me. And then I knew I had a problem. Not only was it just wobbling so bad that I couldn't even begin to try to turn it, I just knew that I was doing something wrong. And then the first thought was, get some CA glue in that crack and seal it up, and then we're going to tackle this problem again. I watched a video that said when you mount your faceplate on the object to be turned, don't use drywall screws because they are brittle and they can break and snap and your piece can come flying off. I did not know that, and I have always used drywall screws to mount the faceplate. Now, but we're talking about a smaller piece of wood. This was a heavier piece of wood, and right away I took off the drywall screws that I had been using, and I got 4 wood screws and put those on. I even went so far as to go into detail to make sure the wood screws extended out of the faceplate by the guys reckoning that it should have been about 7, I don't know what you want to call it, 7 of the swirls on the screw, whatever that's called, and make sure that about 7 of them were extended out past the faceplate so it had enough of the screw to go into the wood and safely hold it. The next step was to make sure the wood was as round as I could get it, and a lot of people cut off the rough edges of their piece of wood on the bandsaw, and so did I. So I slowly turned it, and I was looking right here between the gap for the high pieces and low pieces, and whenever I found one that was too high, I scribbled on it with a pencil, and I just did it all the way around, trying to get the space in here the same. And then I took the grinder and grinded off all the spots where my pencil had left marks of it being too high. So I got it pretty good going across. Turned it on, it still wobbled. Then I got out, handy dandy little level, and found out that the table was unlevel. So I ended up putting a little piece of wood under the back legs, and now I have, it's back to, it's level. Turned it on, still was wobbling. And read a couple more videos, and they said, turn the speed down because the bigger the piece, and I know it doesn't look big. I don't know why next to my hand it looks small. I should have weighed it. This thing is very heavy, and it was originally 7 inches across. It's more like a little over 6.5 in diameter, and then across, I said 3, but no, that's more like 4 inches this way. And it still was, everything I did, it kept wobbling. I was so distressed over this, and then I saw where it said you have to turn the bigger pieces on a lower speed. And in this particular lathe, this is the Harbor Freight 10x18 mini lathe. You have to change the belt down to the lowest speed, which in this case is 750. And so I opened up the manual to see how to change the belt. And on the headstock at the bottom behind, there was a little plastic plate with a little knob on it. And I unscrewed it and took the plate off, and it said that you, around the front, there's a handle next to the motor mount, and you unscrew that with an Allen wrench, which allows you to move the handle up and down, thus releasing and unreleasing the belt, which you had access to around the side of the headstock. And I looked in there and I saw a spindle with 5 different size belt areas. All right, this is on the smallest wheel, if you want to call it that, which is 750, and you see how floppy that is? And so that's where I ended up. I've got everything tight. That's the other thing, make sure everything's tight. This isn't hitting the tool rest, everything's there. Let's see what happens. And it's not turning because the belt is so loose, I can't get it to turn. All right, there it goes. and it's wobbling pretty good. You can't really tell by this video. I'm holding onto the lathe right now. So I went on a journey of watching YouTube videos and poring over the instructions in the lathe manual. And one step by one step, I eliminated issues that I discovered that I was doing wrong. And really, the first issue of all was the fact that I had never turned a piece of wood that was the size this piece of wood was, which is by any standards to anyone kind of small. It was just under 7 inches in diameter and 4 inches wide. And I actually weighed it because I went out and I got a piece of the wood that I normally made bowls with, which was less than 2 inches wide, about 5 inches in diameter, and it was a piece of mahogany, I think. And while heavy, that little piece only weighed a little over 1 pound. I weighed that 6 or 7 inch by almost 4 inch piece of spalted maple, and it weighed almost 4 pounds. That's how heavy this thing is. And it's not that it's wet. It's been in my garage for 2 years, so it's dry. But it just, because of the size difference, it weighed that much more. But you can hear it. But that's the best I got it without jumping all over the place. And the only problem is it says you have to go really, really lightly with your tool. Otherwise, it'll bog it down and it won't turn. I don't know why the belt is so floppy. I did everything I could to make that belt a little bit tighter. But it doesn't seem like it's going tight enough. So it's floppy, but it's spinning. So the next bet here is to try to put a tool to it and see what happens. And it says very lightly, or it will basically probably stop it from spinning. So then I spent a couple more days just poring over video after video after video. And some video suggested that if your belt was floppy, possibly it needed to be exchanged for a new belt. So then I was watching videos and they were saying that on this Harbor Freight lathe, it was a real pain to be able to take the belt off to be able to install a new one. So I was watching a video on how to take the belt off, which right away I thought, I was sick to my stomach. I was like, there's no way I can do what this guy's doing to get that belt off. I'm going to have to either get another lathe or I didn't know what I was going to do. I just felt that I had bought the wrong lathe. It was too much of a problem to have to change the belts like this. And I was just really flustered. So I didn't look at any more videos for about a day. But then I went back to that same video about changing the belt. And I caught my eye that I saw something that I hadn't seen before. So on the headstock at the bottom was where that one plate, plastic plate was that I took off. And it revealed the spindles that the belt was wrapped around. But this guy turned his camera around to the back of the headstock and there was another plate, which I never even noticed on my lathe, obviously, because it was facing away from me. And so I looked around on the back with my flashlight and there was a second plate, took it off, and now I saw the top set of spindles. Bottom set, top set. The belt went around both of them. And the first thing I saw right away was, of course, the bottom was around the 750 little wheel, but the top of the belt was in the middle of the spindle, and it didn't line up at all with that bottom spindle. And I was like, it was like you know how the light bulb goes off and you're like, wow. I could not believe that until this point, no one had said anything about there being a top spindle. I ran out to the garage, got the manual, and I poured over that manual, and nowhere in that manual does it say anything about that top spindle in the motor mount. I mean, in the headstock. I was so mad. So then, of course, I reached in, and my brain said they should match up. So the biggest wheel on the top matched up to the smallest wheel on the bottom. So that's what I did. I moved the belt over, and then I put it on. Immediately, I knew I had solved the problem. It fit on there like it was supposed to be. And then, of course, I pushed down on the motor mount thing, the arm bar there, tightened it up with the Allen wrench, turned it on, and voila. I cannot believe that a company sells a product and doesn't even give the proper instructions on changing the belt from speed to speed or even to remove it. There's no instructions on how to remove that belt. And so I went back again, and all it said was to move the belt to a different spindle by the bottom spindle. It didn't show anything about that top spindle in the manual. I just couldn't believe it. So if you remember, when I took this apart, it said to take this plate off, loosen up that lever, and you can move the motor up and down. And when I touched it, the belt was baggy, baggy, baggy. So I'm watching videos on how to change the belt, thinking it's a crappy belt, and it's talking about this plate back here, which I never noticed before. And look what's in there. Another set of wheels that it doesn't say anything about in the booklet. And the belt was over there. And I thought, that's odd. That doesn't match up, because the big wheel should match up to that little wheel. So, turning this and moving it with my finger, I put it over on the big belt. Hopefully you can see that now. Let me get a light here. And you see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different sizes belts in there. I mean wheels. And then down here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's hard to, there we go. So I thought, well, let me move it over and see what happens. And so I did. And lo and behold, it's turning beautifully. And it's not baggy anymore. Sorry, my camera work is terrible here. So now I'm going to tighten everything back up again, put the plates back on, and I'm going to turn it on and see what happens. All right, everything's back on. This is mounted back on the faceplate. Everything's tightened down. Let's see what happens. Wow. Amazing. Still got some wobble, but that's what I expected, because it's still not even, but wow, what a difference. And so this knowledge learning process has taken me, it was about a week. And so now I put the piece on the lathe, and as you see, it spins perfectly fine. I did attempt to turn it with the I think it was bowl gouge. And right away, I knew there was something not quite right. And then of course, then I realized it's punky wood. It's got punky wood in it. You can barely see where I was going. I had a gouge at first, and there's a spot here where it was like really digging at it. Not sure what that's about. I know the tool is sharp, and then you can see where it was fine going through there. This is the crack that I have in here that I put super glue in there. And then again, it was doing okay right there. Then it grabbed at it again. So I'm kind of wondering what's going on with the wood. I didn't really see anything that would tell me why it's doing that. So did it again. So then I took out a scraper, and I tried the scraper on it for a little bit, and still not doing good. So, but it works. Now see, in that spot right there, it came out perfectly fine when I did it. You could see from here to there, I was working on it. And then, of course, it's still out of shape, so it's hit spots, didn't hit spots. But that part there is like it's tearing the wood. And I know that those tools are sharp. So, I'm going to go after it again, but not today. This is just to show you that I actually did turn it on. Oh, and it's not making as much noise now. Well, it's still noisy, but yeah, it's coming from in here somewhere, I think. Like that wheel, I think is squeaking. The tailstock, I think it's making a squeaky noise. This right here. But anyway, I'm thrilled. Now it's to get into it and make a bowl out of this. And I even took a scraper to see if the scraper made a difference. And I could see on the wood, as I'll show you, you'll see where it turns smooth and then where it's the punky wood. So I ended up that day putting CA glue on the punky spots, and it's been there ever since, because right immediately after discovering the final piece of the puzzle on how to turn this big piece of wood, we went into a heat wave, which we're in currently. We had yesterday was 98, so I haven't gone back to turn it. Since then, I've been watching videos on how to turn punky wood, which apparently spalted maple is kind of famous for being punky, with the CA, and see if I can come up with a video at some point of turning this piece of wood. Hopefully it won't be such a long video as this one. Thanks for watching.